sweet like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I get enough.
All right. You guys sent in some articles about daylight saving time, and wow, this is a lot more controversial than I thought it would be. It's amazing how much debate there is around changing the clocks twice a year.
You're right. It really is. It's fascinating, I think, just how something we do twice a year can spark huge debates and even draw in people like Elon Musk and former President Trump.
Okay, so let's start with Trump. In the past, he's been really against DST. I mean, he even called it very costly to our nation on Truth Social a while back, but now he's saying it's a 50-50 issue. It's kind of a big shift. What do you think is going on there?
Yeah, I think President Trump might be realizing that getting rid of daylight saving time, it's not as easy as he thought it would be. He can't just sign an executive order. It's something that Congress would have to do, and, well, that makes it a lot more complicated.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. It seems like you might be facing some roadblocks he didn't expect. But let's switch gears for a minute. Okay, so Elon Musk recently put out a poll on X, and he asked if DST is canceled, do people prefer a later hour or an earlier hour? What do you think? Why would he even be interested in this?
Well, if you think about Musk's, kind of obsession with productivity and getting the most out of daylight hours, it makes sense. His companies, like Tesla, they're all about, innovation and efficiency. Do you think this poll could be a hint that he's looking into time optimization features? Like, what if Teslas could adjust your schedule and lighting based on the sunrise and sunset?
Whoa, that would be pretty cool. A car that's totally in tune with nature. It's funny how we can't seem to make up our minds about time. Okay, so before we go any further, let's get back to the basics. What is daylight saving time, and why are people so worked up about it? I mean, I'm sure most people listening already know. We spring forward in March, fall back in November, but let's get into the history a bit.
Sure. So the U.S. actually first tried out daylight saving time way back during World War I. It was meant to save energy. The idea was to shift the clock forward in the summer to take advantage of the longer daylight and use less artificial light.
So it was a wartime thing, kind of like rationing, but for sunlight. That's interesting.
Exactly. But here's the thing. It was repealed pretty quickly after the war. Then it came back nationwide in '66 with the Uniform Time Act. It's pretty ironic. What started as a temporary measure has become this permanent part of our lives, even though, the original reason for it doesn't really apply the same way anymore.
That's so true. I mean, we're holding on to a system from a very different time. Okay, so let's fast forward to now. We know Trump and Musk have chimed in, but why is everyone so divided over this? What are the arguments for and against keeping DST?
So the main arguments for DST usually focus on, the longer daylight hours in the summer. People say it's good for retail sales, encourages people to get outside, and makes life better because people have more daylight after work or school.
All right, more sunshine, more fun, more spending money. It sounds like a win-win-win.
Maybe, but it's not that simple. There are a lot of people against DST, like even the American Medical Association. They point to studies that show that changing the clocks can be bad for our health. Things like increased risk of heart attacks, mood problems, and even car accidents because it messes up our sleep and natural rhythms.
Seriously. Moving the clock an hour can do all that.
Well, it's complicated. It's not easy to prove that the time change directly causes these things, but some studies do show a connection. It's definitely something to think about, the pros and cons.
For sure. It seems like there's more to this than meets the eye. Okay, you mentioned before that Congress would have to get involved to get rid of DST. Can you tell me more about the Sunshine Protection Act? I know it was supposed to make DST permanent everywhere.
Yeah, the Senate passed it in 2022, and a lot of people thought it was a done deal. Permanent DST, here we come. But the House never voted on it, so the bill just kind of died.
Wait, what? Why wouldn't they vote on it? This is getting more interesting by the minute.
Right. It's like a political mystery. You've got these big players like Trump and Musk who seem to be changing their minds. You've got a bill that gets stuck in Congress. And you've got the public who are more and more divided about this whole thing. It's pretty wild.
Okay, so before the break, we were talking about the Sunshine Protection Act and how it just kind of stalled in the House. Why didn't they vote on it? It's like they just left us hanging.
It's a good question. Some people think maybe some industries that, like the way things are now, were lobbying behind the scenes to stop it. Or maybe some people were worried about what it would mean for school schedules and commutes, especially in the winter.
It's amazing how much this all ties into, economics and politics. It's more than just changing the clock. But okay, let's say the bill had passed and we had permanent DST. Would everyone be happy with more daylight in the evenings? Or are there downsides we're not thinking about?
Well, the people who say the time change is bad for our health wouldn't be too happy. It would be like being in a constant state of jet lag, messing with our sleep and everything. And yeah, those long summer evenings sound nice, but think about people way up north. The sun would rise super late in the winter. Kids would be going to school in the dark for months.
Yeah, that's a good point. We have to think about everyone, not just the people who like the idea of more daylight. What if we went the other way and just got rid of DST completely? What would that look like?
A lot of health experts are starting to think that's the best option.
Mm-hmm.
If we stuck with standard time all year round, our clocks would match up better with the sun. That would probably mean better sleep and maybe even fewer health problems.
So it's like a trade-off. Longer summer evenings versus better sleep and health. Tough choice. But what about the economy? Some people say DST is good for business, that people shop and travel more when there's more daylight. Is that true?
Honestly, the research isn't clear on that. Some studies say retail sales go up a little during DST, but others say there's no real effect, or even that it hurts some businesses. Same with tourism. It's hard to know for sure if it's DST that's making a difference.
So maybe not a clear win for the economy either.
Yeah.
It seems like both sides have good points, which makes this even more complicated. Okay, let's think outside the box for a second. What if we just threw out our whole time system and started over? Are there any other ways to keep time that might work better?
Actually, yeah, there are some really interesting ideas out there. One that I find pretty fascinating is this thing called decimal time. It was used for a short time during the French Revolution, believe it or not.
Decimal time. I've never heard of that. What is it exactly?
Basically, they divided the day into 10 hours, and each hour had 100 minutes, and each minute had 100 seconds. They wanted to make time more, rational and line it up with the decimal system like the metric system.
Wow, that's a big change. It sounds like something mathematicians would love, but wouldn't be super confusing for everyone else?
Yeah, it was definitely confusing, and that's one reason why they stopped using it. People were so used to the old system with hours, minutes, and seconds that it was too hard to switch. It kind of shows that timekeeping isn't just about being scientific. It's also about, what people are used to and how we think about time in our culture.
That makes sense. Even if something makes sense logically, doesn't mean people will actually use it. So are there any other timekeeping ideas that might actually work for people?
Well, there's this idea called slow time that's getting some attention. It's not so much about changing how we measure time, but more about changing how we think about it and how we use it.
Slow time. That sounds interesting, but I'm not sure I get it. What does that mean in real life?
It's about realizing that time isn't just something to be managed and controlled. It's an experience, and it's different for everyone. Imagine a world where we focus on quality time instead of just quantity, where we value connections and experiences more than just checking things off a to-do list.
That sounds amazing. But is it realistic? I mean, we live in such a fast-paced world. Do we all have to quit our jobs and live in the woods to experience slow time?
No, not at all. It's more about making choices,
Right.
about what's important to you and how you spend your time. We can't control the clock, but we can control what we do with our time.
Yeah, that's true. But how do we balance this idea of slow time with work, family, and everything else? It seems like there's never enough time.
It starts with small changes. Maybe you set aside time for something you really enjoy, or you disconnect from technology for a few hours, or you just try to be more present in the moment instead of rushing through everything.
I like that. We don't have to change our whole lives, just make little adjustments. Okay, let's talk about the rest of the world for a minute. We've been focused on the US, but how do other countries handle DST?
It's all over the place. Most of Europe does DST, but places like China and Japan don't. And then you've got countries like Australia, where it's different depending on the state.
So it's just as confusing internationally. Do you think there's a chance that we'll ever have one universal time system for the whole world?
That's a really tough question. I mean, there are good reasons to have a universal time, like for business and travel and communication. But then you have to think about different cultures and how they view time. Different parts of the world have different amounts of daylight, and people have different traditions.
Yeah, it's like trying to force everyone to fit into the same mold. It wouldn't work. But okay, just for fun, let's say we could magically make a universal time happen. What would that look like? Would it be good or bad?
It's hard to say for sure, but it would change everything. Imagine everyone on the same time zone, business deals, flights, even online chats, all perfectly synced.
That sounds efficient, but wouldn't it also, Erase the things that make different cultures unique, their own ways of thinking about time.
That's a great point. It's a trade-off between, making things more standard and keeping those differences that make cultures interesting. Time is part of who we are. It's not just a scientific thing.
Yeah, it's about more than just measuring minutes and hours. Okay, let's bring it back to the personal level. We've talked about all these different ways to measure time, but what about the quality of time itself? How do we make the most of the time we have, no matter what the clock says or whether it's DST or not?
That's a question we all need to ask ourselves.
Yeah.
It's about being intentional with our time. What makes you happy? What gives your life meaning? Make time for those things, even if it means letting go of other stuff that's less important.
I love that. It's about investing our time in what matters, not just managing it. It's about building a life that feels good, even if it's not always about being productive.
Exactly. That's really what slow time is all about. It's not about doing less, it's about doing what matters. Choosing how you spend your time, living according to your values, and really appreciating each moment.
Okay, welcome back. So we've talked a lot about daylight saving time, politics, global perspectives, even how people kept time, like way back when. But I want to shift gears a little bit. Instead of talking about the big picture, let's talk about, time in our own lives.
That's a really important point. How we experience time, how we manage it, it affects everything. Our well-being, how productive we are, even just how happy we are overall.
Right. It doesn't matter if we have DST or decimal time or whatever, if we aren't using our time well. So let's talk about how to make the most of the time we have. We talked about slow time earlier. Is that something we can actually do in our everyday lives, or is it just like a nice idea?
It's totally doable, but it takes, effort and a willingness to rethink some of the things we believe about time. I think one of the biggest challenges is this feeling that we never have enough time, that there's just not enough time in the day to do everything we need to do, let alone the things we want to do.
I think everyone feels that way sometimes. There's so much pressure to be productive, to be efficient, to get the most out of every minute. It's exhausting.
It really is. And it often makes us react to time instead of controlling it. We let our schedules run our lives. Slow time is about taking back control, making choices about how we spend our time, and focusing on things that are really important to us, things that fit with our values and goals.
So instead of just reacting, we need to be proactive. We need to be in charge of our time. How do we actually do that?
It starts with paying attention, like really noticing how you're spending your time right now. Are you wasting time on things? Are you doing things that you don't actually enjoy or that don't make you feel good? Once you know how you're using your time, you can start changing things.
It's like taking a look at your spending habits or your diet, right? See what needs to change. So once we know what to work on, what are some things we can do to get our time back and create that slow time feeling?
One thing that really helps is time blocking. Instead of just having a to-do list and trying to fit things in, block off specific times for different activities like work, family, exercise, even just relaxing. It helps you stay organized and focused, and you don't feel pulled in so many directions.
Makes sense, like creating boundaries around our time and protecting them. But what about all the distractions? Social media, emails, everything that's constantly asking for our attention. How do we stay focused when there's all this stuff pulling us away?
That's where digital minimalism comes in. It's about using technology intentionally, setting limits on how much time you spend online and just disconnecting sometimes when you need to concentrate or just be in the moment.
I like that. It's not about getting rid of technology. It's about using it in a way that works for us, not against us.
Yeah.
But sometimes it feels like even if we're organized, there's just too much to do. How do we decide what to focus on and not feel overwhelmed by everything on our plate?
It's important to learn to say no. We feel like we have to say yes to every request, every invitation, every opportunity. But sometimes the best thing you can do is politely decline things that you don't have time for or that aren't important to you. It protects your time and helps you stay sane.
I think that's so true. We feel like we have to do it all. Sometimes saying no is the best thing you can do for yourself. But even when we manage our time well and have good boundaries, how do we make sure our time is actually meaningful? How do we make sure we're not just getting things done, but also living a life that feels good?
It comes down to making sure what you do with your time matches up with your values and goals. What are the things that give you purpose? What makes you feel alive and engaged? Make time for those things, even if it means letting go of something else that maybe isn't as important in the long run.
It's not just about managing time. It's about choosing how to spend it. It's about building a life that feels rich and full. even if it doesn't always look productive.
I couldn't have said it better myself. That's the heart of slow time. It's not about doing less, it's about doing what matters. It's about making choices, living with intention, and really being present in each moment.
That's a great takeaway. It reminds us that we have more control over our time than we think. And, being intentional about how we spend our time can make life so much richer and more fulfilling. Thank you so much for talking with us today. It's been such a great conversation. I've learned a lot.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And to everyone listening, we hope this deep dive into daylight saving time has given you some things to think about, maybe even inspired you to change how you think about and use your own time. Remember, time is precious. Don't waste it. Enjoy the moments and build a life that feels right for you. Until next time, keep exploring.
Sound the alarm. I'm coming up. We'll have a ball. I'm sweet like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll.